All right, for more on this, we're now joined by our SABC Correspondent Sarah Coates, who is in Tel Aviv. Sarah, a very good afternoon to you. So speculation has been rife for a while now, especially after two moderates resigned from the cabinet last week. And of course, we mentioned their Gantz. I mean, what led to this decision? What are you hearing?
Hello there. Well, we do know that Benny Gantz, a centrist leader, he and Gadi Eisenkot, he was a former military chief of staff. They joined this war cabinet after the outbreak of this war to really make these key decisions and also to show unity and finally to block these far-right elements, specifically the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and also the Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich from joining this small war cabinet and making these key decisions. Now, you mentioned there was widely expected, is largely symbolic, with Netanyahu now saying that he will consult with a limited forum for sensitive decisions. But what this really goes to show is that the government is far from unified. Certainly, it also shows that Netanyahu is potentially trying to block these far right-wing elements, Ben-Gvir and also Smotrich. They have actually been asking for a seat on this very small war cabinet. So the dissolution of that blocks them from getting on there. And if they actually had, in fact, made their way into this limited war cabinet, it could have potentially downgraded Israel's standing even further in the international community, given that they hold very, very far right-wing views. And these are people who've been saying that they want to resettle Gaza and also been calling for no aid to get into the Strip.
Now, I mean, you touched a little bit on what I was going to ask you in terms of, indication of what's going to happen in relation to the formation of a government. I mean, let's talk then about the pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu has been receiving, particularly as calls for a ceasefire intensify. I want you to touch a little bit on issues that are happening domestically, Sarah.
Certainly, Benjamin Netanyahu is under fire. He's really under pressure from all angles. This week is a week of disruption that's been organised here across the country as these people from these anti-government demonstrating groups, they've been organising things like blocking main highways, they've been burning tyres, and they are demanding that Benjamin Netanyahu step down immediately and call for fresh elections. Now, we also do need to remember the amount of pressure he is also under from residents of these northern Israeli communities. There are right now some 60,000 internally displaced Israelis from these border towns with Lebanon. They've been unable to go home since this war broke out, basically, due to the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel. And they are becoming increasingly angry, increasingly frustrated, and they are calling for the security situation in these northern towns to be restored. And this is why this top US envoy, he will arrive, or he's actually just hit the ground he'll be here for talks a little later today, meeting with senior officials. This is Amos Hochstein, and he'll also be visiting Lebanon, really amid fears within the Biden administration that if this fighting between Hezbollah and Israel is not contained, that it could actually escalate into a wider regional war that could then potentially draw in Iran. So Benjamin Netanyahu under a lot of pressure on that front, also domestically to step down, and not to mention internationally from the international community really trying to pressure him into agreeing to a ceasefire deal with Hamas.
Talk to us about humanitarian crisis at this stage, because we do know there is some calm relatively during the day, allowing, of course, aid agencies to move around. How's that going in terms of easing the crisis that we've been seeing there?
We've actually just heard from the head of the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, just spoke out about these so-called tactical pauses that were announced yesterday by the Israeli military, saying that basically operationally they are not having any effect whatsoever on the ground. We do know that heavy fighting is continuing right across the Gaza Strip, amid reports that even in Rafah, where we do know the military is still operating in that area down in the south, that this terminal at the Rafah border crossing, which was that terminal that was shown a lot on the news at the beginning of this war, where people were trying to get in and out of the Gaza Strip. That has reportedly now been completely destroyed. So operationally, according to sources on the ground, these so-called tactical pauses that were announced yesterday by the military aren't having any effect. And we also need to remember that it was shortly after the Israeli military came out to announce these so-called tactical pauses to get more aid into the Strip, that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, came out to say that he had absolutely no idea about this and that fighting will continue as planned.